Hello, my name is Kuster. I work in the B3 prioritization unit in ECHA, but today I'm actually here presenting a broader group of colleagues from many units and directorates across ECHA, from chemistry to risk and hazard assessment and so on. So I'm just the spokesperson for today. And our topic is to work on groups. How do we get to a safer use of chemicals faster? This is the first time we present this to a broader audience, so I hope you find this interesting. The presentation today will be structured in 4 parts. First, I want to explain you why we work on groups of substances. Then we want to move on to how we do this work, how we are organized internally, how we have set up this kind of work. Then I want to show you how you can find more information. If you have more questions, need to read more, we will share some links with you. And then I wanted to close with a few things to remember. But let's get right into it. So why do we work on groups of substances? This is a rather complex picture, but I'm showing this because it shows very nicely how we have set up the machinery of the REACH and CLP processes in ECHA. And it also will show you the very central role that our work on group plays in these processes. Starting from the registered substances, from the CNL notified substances and other substances, we are building groups. We are building these groups based largely on structural similarity, and these groups form the basis for what we call the assessment of regulatory needs. I need to stress this work on groups is an informal preparatory work for the official regulatory processes. This is not a work that would replace anything. It is here to better connect the existing processes. It doesn't produce legally binding decisions. It doesn't replace the official public consultations. All this continues going through the official processes, the processes that you know. Now, the aim of our assessment of regulatory needs and the work on groups is to efficiently select groups of substances, especially those where we think there might be a potential concern. We look at them and we see if there's more information needed to address this concern more comprehensively. And as I said, this goes then to the official processes like dossier evaluation, substance evaluation, but also to the, for example, ED, endocrine disruptor assessment work. From there, once we have the information, we again can look holistically at what we have and can make an informed decision either if there's no need for further regulatory action at this point in time. So that means that at the current state, with the current information, this would not be a major priority to continue investigations. Or if it is something that needs to be addressed under another legislation, so it's something that falls out of our remit. But for everything else, we move on with the established, well-known regulatory processes, from the registry of intentions to CLH to SVHC identification, and so on. The grouping, as I said, is very much at the core of this. We use this work to fire substances that need regulatory action. We have the chemical universe to map the progress in this work. I will come back to that very soon. And we have the annual IRS report, which is the Integrated Regulatory Strategy report, where you will find more details, and also this will come later on. Now, what is the chemical universe? What do we mean with chemical universe mapping? Well, the chemical universe is a tool for authorities. It helps us to focus our work and to track the progress. For every registered substance, we define one regulatory pool. This is based on planned, ongoing, or concluded regulatory action. In this picture, it would start from the left, from the gray bubbles, so to say, where we say, okay, these are the substances that have not been thoroughly assessed yet. And it moves through data generation or consideration of risk management measures towards the right side, into either the stream that I explained earlier, where we say, currently we do not see a need for further action, or to risk management ongoing, which is, for example, that there would be a restriction in place. Now you can imagine over time, the goal is to reduce the size of these gray bubbles, to increase our understanding of the chemicals that are registered under REACH, and to identify the proper way forward for them. And with the chemical universe, we can map this. And with the annual IRS report, we are sharing the details on how this work is done. Now, why do we really think working on groups brings benefits? For many substances, especially substances of potential concern, there is already a relevant regulatory action ongoing. Often it might not be on the substance itself, but on a related substance. So in that sense, working on a group allows us to treat those related substances consistently. We target them at the same time and also at the right time. We are able to move forward with actions, first of all, to identify the proper actions, but also to move forward with them on substances that require this action, even if for each individual substance, we might not have fully compliant dossiers. We might have data gaps, but looking at the group allows us to speed up the risk management process. By addressing these related substances at the same time, we become more predictable, and we also support informed substitution. So we help companies to understand that similar substances with similar hazardous properties, for example, will be regulated at the same time. So moving from one hazardous substance to a related, similarly hazardous substance can be avoided. And it makes it also easier for companies to plan how they substitute these substances. That said, and as I said earlier, this is all preparatory work to support the REACH and CLP processes. It is not a formal process in the traditional kind of sense. Now, how do we in ECHA work on groups of substances? Starting from the list of groups from the chemical universe, so all the substances that have been registered under REACH. We look at structural similarity. We build groups, for example, around a substance where we know it is carcinogenic, mutagenic, and so on. We preferably choose a substance that is on the market in high volume and that has not been addressed otherwise before. This is what we call a seed, and it's the starting point of forming a group. We move forward with these chemically related groups, but we also sometimes exceptionally look at substances and groups which have the same function or the same use, or which are relevant for a specific industry sector. It is really important to stress in this moment that the groups that we built, they are not the same groups that registrants read across. According to REACH Annex 11 1.5 would be the categories. And it is not the same groups that later on are regulated in our official processes. These groups are built for our assessment only. They help us to screen faster and to get an understanding faster. They are not preempting or overriding any of these other groupings that I tried to describe earlier. Once we have such a group, we have a team of experts within ECHA, but also sometimes from the member states who make a first assessment. They identify actions, follow-up processes, and once these processes have concluded, the group of experts will come together and look again at the improved basis of information and update their knowledge, their proposals for what needs to happen further. I will come back to that in a subsequent slide. And in the end, as I mentioned earlier, either the groups will end up with currently no further action proposed, meaning that at this point in time, they are not, there's no need from us to take additional actions, or they end up as risk management ongoing, for example, with a restriction. Now, the circle that you've seen before, this iterative assessment, what does it mean? Well, at the first assessment, it's really on a high level, on a screening level. The team looks at the hazards, at the users, at the exposure. It looks at what we call the group boundaries. So the members within a group, how they are related, how similar they are, if they need to be subgrouped. In a way, also at the potential for substitution based on this understanding of structural similarity. And after this first screening assessment, the colleagues draw up a report, what we call the assessment of regulatory needs. They define the immediate next action. For example, does the substance need to go to data generation to get more information, or do we move to a risk management action or to no action? And like I said earlier, our groups are not really comparable with the groups that you have known so far, maybe. So these actions that we identify, they may be on the whole group, they may be on a subgroup, they may be on individual substances. So there is a wide range of differences. Usually, in our experience so far, the next step is data generation, or currently no action. In some cases, also risk management is already possible. And like I said, the read across the categories, they are only checked in the official processes, for example, in compliance check. And with each iteration of our assessment, the depth and the knowledge on the substances will increase further. Last year alone, in 2020, we have looked at around 1,900 substances in this way. As of today, in total, since starting this kind of work, we have looked at nearly 4,000 substances. Many of these substances have never been assessed by authorities before. At the same time, many already have completed or ongoing regulatory actions. As I said, the focus is on those substances that are on the market in higher volumes. At the same time, also lower volume substances get dragged into this stream of work based on the structural similarity. Now, when it comes to foreseen regulatory needs, this is the plan for the longer term regulatory risk management measures. It goes beyond the next action. This longer term regulatory need may be revised, for example, after data generation or after a CLH has been done. And also for the substances where no regulatory risk management is foreseen at the moment, this assessment will be revised. Many of the substances, you see that here in the gray area on the left bottom, where we say currently no risk management is needed. Many of these substances have currently data generation ongoing. So our conclusion, our current assessment saying we do not need to take immediate action will be revised once the hazard or the low hazard have been confirmed. You also see that there is a certain percentage of substances where we cannot make a plan yet for the risk management measures. This also usually relates to ongoing data generation. And then there's around a fifth of the substances where we can see already an immediate need for risk management actions. These go to authorization, restriction, CLH, or a combination of those. A few also to OEL, occupational exposure limits. As I said in the beginning, we also wanted to point you towards more information. There is the annual IRS report where you find information on the progress that we have made in finding and addressing substances of concern. You find information about the chemical universe, statistics, but also case studies. And then, and also this is something that we have not made public so far, we are working on a publication of the assessments of regulatory needs. So these reports that our colleagues are working on, that they're drafting with the immediate action and also the foreseen regulatory needs, the longer term perspective for all substances in the group. These reports will be made public. This increases the transparency and predictability of our work. And we're sure you will find those very interesting. The plan is to start publishing from the end of this year. And as we go along, addressing more and more substances, also the publication will increase. Now, to take away from this presentation, like I said, we're doing more faster compared to the previous years. We have assessed 10 times more substances in 2020 than in any of the previous years before. This has to do with ECHA dedicating resources into this. This enables us to be faster, to take evidence-based decisions, to identify many substances that can go directly to regulatory risk management. For example, last year alone, we found around 300 substances that would be potential risk management candidates if the hazards are confirmed. We are more consistent, holistic, predictable. We minimize regrettable substitution. We integrate the regulatory processes. And we make the whole machinery of REACH and CLP processes work more smoothly and more predictably. That said, we invite you to update your registrations proactively. Our assessment is to a very, very large extent based on the data that we find in the REACH registrations. So the hazards, the uses, the volumes, and so on, they form the basis for us to identify a need for regulatory action or not, and to request data generation or not, for example. So please update your registrations if you're a registrant. And I guess for all of us, all of you, follow the publication of the assessments of regulatory needs that is forthcoming on our website. As I said, the target date would be towards the end of this year. With that, I would like to close. Thank you for your attention. And we are looking forward to your questions later on in the Q&A.
We seem to have a problem from our room with the video. I hope you can hear the audio while we're figuring out the technical issues. So thanks for sticking with us. And yeah, maybe as a first disclaimer, just to let you know that the session is recorded. We can take questions from the Q&A tab. So on the right-hand side, you have a small Q&A button. You can vote the questions up and down, and we can take them from there. And we'll try to answer them here from the room. We have a few colleagues here from different directories who are working together on this, the work on groups. We also have a little poll going. So if you find a moment to answer there, would be interesting to hear from you where you see the benefits of the work on group from your side. And we maybe look at this in the very end. We have about 15 minutes now before the next session starts. We had a lot of questions already in the chat, and sorry, in the Q&A. Many of them on the publication of groups, what is publicly available, and so on. And I have my colleagues here in the room. I think my colleague Kuster from the prioritization unit would be able to take at least maybe many questions in one on the publication, where we're going, what is going to be visible, and so on. So Kuster, please.
Thanks, Jonathan. And yes, I will try to clarify what will be available on our website. So we will publish on our website all assessment reports once we have the first finalized version of those. So this is what you will find on our website, but we will not as such publish a list of groups. Of course, if you look for your substance, you will see if there is an assessment report published, whether the substance belong or not to a group. So this will be visible. I think there was also one question on consultation. You can always send comments, maybe via the help desk if you have some question. However, we just wanted to flag, and I think Jonathan explained that also during the presentation, that of course for some of those assessments, you will see that the first step is actually data generation. And even later, when we will actually indicate, for instance, the need for a CLH or the need for some more regulatory risk management, I think we would highly encourage you also to follow the normal consultation route linked to those processes rather than to send help desk question. But it's, I guess, mainly for this early stage. I think I took most of the points.
Thank you, Kuster. Please, if you feel that part of your question was not covered, just post in the Q&A and we will try to come back to that. There's a question from Samantha Saunders. We have heard previously from ECHA that the integrated regulatory strategy reduces requirements for new hazard data generation, thus new animal tests. Please, could you explain how this is the case? I think my colleague Hanno Braunschweiler would be able to answer that. So Hanno, please.
Good afternoon. Yes, thanks. So in this situation where we put together the substances based on structural similarities, and when we see in the preliminary assessment that there's evidence that the hazards for the groups are similar, or that's the assumption, then the data sets for the substances are considered together when we assess the groups. And this approach may, to some extent, alleviate the issues with the lack of information in the registration dossiers for one or more of the substances in the group. So if we would look at them one by one, we might not be satisfied with the level of information in them. But when we assess them in this kind of weight of evidence, similar approach like the weight of evidence, we might have some preliminary views how the hazards look for those group of substances. And this may then reduce the need for animal testing when we look at those substances at the group level, because for single substances, we might want to generate further information, but we might be more confident when looking at the hazard information at the group level. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Hanno. We have a few questions on polymers and so on. We're not able to take them today from the room, so we'll try to answer them in the chat. The same goes for Axel, your question on substitution. Also that we'll try to take in the chat, sorry, in the Q&A, so in written. In the meanwhile, we have some questions on grouping, about the grouping validation, about the basis of grouping. Panos, do you think you would want to say something? I see there are some questions, some answers already in the chat on grouping, on validation, how the machinery works. Do you want to maybe also take a bit the floor here? Thanks a lot.
Hello. Yes, I can explain a few words, given that the answers we can provide are very short. Indeed, ECHA has developed a machinery, an IT-based machinery, to identify structural similarities in the registration dossiers and also other submissions. And we also take into account read across and category arguments proposed by registrants. And the results of these IT operations are examined by chemists carefully, who finalize the group boundaries from their point of view. And then this group is given to the assessors, the hazard and risk assessors, who are actually developing the strategies that you will see soon published. And of course, the IT algorithms are verified. The chemists are also verifying the outcomes of the IT algorithms, and the assessors are also scrutinizing the group boundaries. So there are many opportunities and points in time where we check the quality of the group boundaries. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Panos. As you realize, we still have a bit issues with the camera, so we will disappear for, let's say, 5 seconds, and then we're back with you. And we hope it works then. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for the colleagues for figuring this out. Yeah, sorry for the interruption. We have one question from Peter Fisk about grouping hazardous but also safe substances. Palmi, I think you've seen, I've seen you answered already, my colleague Palmi answered already in the chat on the question of the grouping safer and grouping hazardous substances. Do you maybe also want to come in on that briefly live? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see even we now have a camera. I think Panos, who spoke earlier, touched up on this, but yeah, there are a few questions on the hazardous chemicals and whether they only group hazardous chemicals, whether all substances have the same classification in a group, etc. This is not true. We group primarily based on structural similarity, based on read across arguments, based on category assessments, etc. So we can be grouping together substances that are hazardous and substances that are maybe less hazardous. So they do not have the same classification always. We don't assume that the same actions apply to every substance in the group. They are wider than this. So certain regulatory actions are relevant to certain substances in the group. So, you know, strictly the same hazardous properties, no, that is not the criteria for the grouping. I hope that this clarifies a bit. A few other questions here.
Thank you, Palmi. I see there's a question on use and exposure that also has had a very brief answer in the chat already from my colleague Christelle. Christelle, do you think you want to go into a bit more detail on the use exposure information in our assessments? Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, we are limited to few characters. So I think I was saying that the basis for our assessment is, of course, what we have in the registration dossier. So we start from there. And this is what you will see also in the report we will publish. So we need to make some assumption based on that. And this is what will be reflected. Of course, as we will move to more regulatory action, there will be the normal process to gather also information. But I think as a recommendation, as soon as you see that actually we have done something on your substances, please have a look and cross-check what you have as information in the registration dossier to see whether it's still up to date.
Thanks a lot, Christelle. I think this point of bringing the registration information up to date, it also applies, of course, to the hazard information. And in the subsequent sessions, our colleagues from the Hazard Directorate are going into detail there still. I think there's a question on grouping and regrettable substitution. Julian Lau writes, how do you frame your grouping when it comes to evaluate regrettable substitution? As sometimes it is difficult to stop when you take into account analogs, either functional or structural. I wonder if any of my colleagues would want to come in on that one. Christelle, maybe you as well. Thank you.
I think this grouping work really aim at avoiding regrettable substitution, as you say. Now, what we can do at this early assessment stage is mainly to reflect in terms of hazard properties and structure, and from what we see from how the substances are used, from their function. So we are not actually able to conclude on any regrettable substitution, but we are providing information on how we think the substances are similar, and how we expect from that similarity that potentially they could actually be used in other uses that we see within this group, for instance. So more on interchangeability of potential interchangeability of substances. That's what we can do at this level of assessment.
Thank you, Christelle. I'm scrolling through the through the list of questions. I see something that maybe you, Palmi, could answer. It's about the website marking some substances with expert judgment ECHA. The question is, if it is marked like this, what does that mean? Or Hanu, can you elaborate? I think.
Yes. So although what we're describing now is sort of a new way of working, where we try to group together substances and come up with ways forward for regulatory actions. We have been grouping substances together for quite some time, and for instance, for certain regulatory actions, such as restrictions or even RMOAs, etc., for quite some time. And these are generally smaller groups and usually are going down the same path or same regulatory action. And when we say expert judgment ECHA, this means that these groups are created for a particular regulatory action. I'm trying to think of an example here. I can't really think off the top of my head, but they are much more, I guess, focused usually than the groups that we are talking about now. So there are maybe slight differences in some of the groups that we have on the website. But expert judgment ECHA means that they have been scrutinized by our chemistry experts.
Thanks a lot, Palmi. Looking at the time, the next session is going to start in a minute. Thank you all for sticking with us. Thanks to the colleagues for answering the questions. I just had a brief look at the results of the poll. So the majority of you sees the benefits in the treating related substances consistently, and also in tackling regrettable substitution. Thank you for the replies. I think it's very interesting to see also your perspective in this. Thanks for, like I said, thank you for following us. Thanks for joining. There will be a recording later on the website. We will also publish the Q&As on the website later on. We hope this format remotely worked for all of you. Maybe in the future it's possible again to see live at least some of you. With that, thanks a lot. Have a nice afternoon and hopefully interesting discussions there. Thank you.